Hello, I'm Philip Morgan from the University of Manchester and welcome to this first in a series of presentations all around contact lens discomfort. I think this is a really interesting and important area, and the reason I'm interested in it is not just because of the biology of comfort, why the eye can feel a contact lens, or what is it about a contact lens that makes the eye uncomfortable. I think they're really interesting topics, but I'm interested in discomfort because of the overall impact that this has on the success of contact lens patients and of individual contact lens practices. So in this series of presentations, I'm going to be talking through the various issues related to this, and importantly, how we can make things better and improve the experience of our contact lens patients. This series of presentations is sponsored by Alcon, but for purposes of transparency, here's a list of companies I have some involvement with as director, or I've received through my research group funding from to do our contact lens research. The first of this series of presentations is about how we can go about doubling the number of contact lens wearers. Now, if you were to create a list about how this might be possible, you'd probably come up with a similar list to me, maybe a brand new material that will open up contact lenses to a whole host of new people, and new designs, a new toric lens or a new multifocal lens perhaps, that again will mean more people can wear contact lenses. New drops or solutions might have some impact, or there might be sort of a radical new form of contact lens that again will bring new people through the door. But I think something that has maybe more than any of these factors is this: minimization of the number of dropouts. I think this is the easiest of all of these 5 possibilities, and importantly, something that it is within the hands of the eye care practitioner. Because as eye care practitioners, we have enormous influence, of course, on the success of our patients, but also the success of our practices more generally, and in the terms of contact lenses, the contact lens industry. We have great authority and great power to make lenses a success or not. And to back this up, I've got perhaps 2 pieces of evidence. The first is I want to look at the success of contact lenses in these 2 neighbouring Western European countries, Belgium and the Netherlands. Many of you will know these 2 countries, but what you might not know is that there's a great disparity in the number of contact lens wearers in those 2 markets. About 5% of adults wear contact lenses in Belgium. It's over twice that in the Netherlands at about 12%. So why is this? When we look at the demography of these 2 countries, it's pretty similar. They both have broadly similar populations. The age distribution is about the same. They're both wealthy Western European countries. I don't think it's the patients or the wearers that are determining this difference in the success of contact lenses. I think somebody in Antwerp wants the same sort of thing from their vision and from their eyes and from their potential contact lenses as somebody from Rotterdam does. I don't think it's the patients. I think it's the eye care practitioners. And what we do know is that the eye care practitioners in these 2 markets for prescribing contact lenses are really quite different. Belgium is an ophthalmological driven market, whereas in the Netherlands it's optometry based. Now, that's not to say ophthalmology markets can't be successful. Japan is an example of an enormously successful ophthalmology controlled contact lens market. But nevertheless, in Belgium and the Netherlands, I think the attitude and the training and the experience with contact lenses is probably different between these 2 types of ECPs, and the enthusiasm and the knowledge of the optometrists and others, the contact lens specialists in the Netherlands, means that it is perhaps the most successful contact lens market in Europe. So the ECP really drives this on. Here's another example. Over the past 25 years, a number of projects have been done to look at how successful are contact lenses dependent on the approach and the communication that happens in the consulting room. Work done, in fact, by my wife, Sarah Morgan, some of this done by myself and along with Nick Atkins. So an early project about 25 years ago looked at what happens in a consulting room situation when a patient who is suitable, it would seem, for contact lenses does not have the option of contact lenses raised with them. If they have to do the hard work and ask if contact lenses might be appropriate for them. Well, in that scenario, in this survey, only 10% of those patients eventually were fitted and purchased contact lenses. Simply being proactive in these same practice settings, if the practitioner suggests contact lenses as an option, that number really rockets almost threefold, so that 3 months from that point, 26% of people have purchased contact lenses. And if we go one stage further, that is to offer a simple contact lens trial on the day. In this experiment, we simply said to the patients, would you like me to pop a lens on your eye so that you can perhaps see your spectacle frames better today when you choose them? Well, remarkably, over a third of people who received that invitation or that suggestion have purchased contact lenses 3 months later. The authority and the power of the ECP in this area is extremely significant. Well, I want to talk now about how many people discontinue from contact lenses, and what a shame to put in all that effort at the fitting time and perhaps having support staff train up the patient to use their contact lens. What a shame to have gone through all of that and then for people to drop out of contact lenses. Well, it's been thought of for a long time that this is an important issue, but it's only very recently that we've had good data, good facts to support this. And we should be indebted to the work here of Anna Solly, Graham Young and Chris Hunt, who published 2 back-to-back papers 2 or 3 years ago, and that brought a lot of new information to the fore here. What they've done in this experiment was to look at retrospectively fits of 500 and something new contact lens wearers across 29 optometry practices in the UK. They followed up these patients very carefully, worked out what had happened, how many people ultimately had been successful and how many had not been. And this is the main chart from their paper. What they found is with new contact lens wearers over a 12-month period, the retention rate, so the number of people still in contact lenses after 12 months, was 74%, or a dropout rate or a discontinuation rate of 26%, if you prefer. But you can see from this chart, this is not a linear effect. More people who drop out, that's kind of bunched up towards the early stages. And in fact, half of the people who would eventually drop out do so in the first 2 months. This is a really important fact that I'll reflect on later in this series. This paper is full of interesting information. I would recommend you read it. It's in the journal Contact Lens and Anterior Eye. Another fact they found was retention rates were higher in people with higher refractive errors. The lowest amongst people with refractive errors near plano. Perhaps they don't have maybe the same motivation or need for their contact lens correction as higher myopes or higher hyperopes. So there's some really interesting data from this work. Another interesting feature that was reported in this paper was that irrespective of whether they were looking at national groups, big groups across the country, or independent practices, the sort of patterns here were the same, that we go from around practices that only have about a 50% retention rate all the way through to practices with 100%. Doesn't matter whether you're in an independent practice or a national chain, you see this sort of phenomenon. And I think all practices can probably drive the success of their practices upwards, that they can get nearer to 100%. Why are these people dropping out of contact lenses? We see the rates are pretty high. 26% of people drop out in the first year of their contact lens use. Well, various people have looked at this over the years. My favourite study here is the work of Kathy Dumbleton and colleagues at the University of Waterloo in Canada. They studied over 4,000 contact lens wearers, asked them, well, why did you drop out from contact lens use? And you'll see the two clear winners in terms of the main reasons for this were those two top horizontal lines, discomfort and dryness. And I'm going to lump those together and call that contact lens discomfort. Contact lens discomfort in this study accounted for between 40 and 50% of people discontinuing their contact lens use. Everything else was very much secondary. So discomfort is the thing here that we need to be thinking about and addressing. And if we can address it, the impact on the success of our patients is dramatic. Here's how we can double the number of contact lens wearers. And I mentioned before the number of about 26% of people dropping out in the first year. That's new wearers. Now, any individual practice will have, of course, a mix of wearers, some new, some old. And on average, it is thought that the discontinuation rate for this range of patients is about 17% each year. Still a pretty high number. Now, on average around the world, the number of contact lens wearers is increasing slowly, and the two figures that are generally accepted are that a typical contact lens practice will have an increase of contact lens wearers of 25% each year, whilst losing that 17%. 25% in, 17% out, and those two numbers combine to give us this kind of slow growth. And if we have 1,000 contact lens patients in a practice today, if we project those two numbers out for 20 years, we'll have over 4,000 wearers over that period. It turns out that the shape of this curve, the slope of this curve, is very sensitive to that 17% number. What happens if we continue to build the contact lens practice with 25% new wearers every year, but the 17%, the dropout rate, falls to 15, to 13, to 11, and so on. And we get this dramatic change in the curves, as you can see here. And if we look, perhaps pick the 13% dropout rate, well, if we only have 13% dropout rate, we'll have over 9,000 wearers. Here's how you can double the number of contact lens wearers. And all we need to do that is to go from 17% dropout down to 13. And remember the influence of the words of the eye care practitioner here. I think this is something that is achievable. So what have we learned in this first introductory talk of this series? Well, hopefully I've convinced you that eye care practitioners have an enormous role in the success of contact lenses. Some patients drop out. Now we have good numbers around this, the dynamics of dropouts. How many people drop out and when do they do so? We know that maybe something like a quarter of people drop out in the first 12 months of contact lens use, and the main reason for doing so is discomfort. This is what we're going to focus on. This is why discomfort is the thread through this series of presentations. And if we can make some small impacts, if we can make some small inroads into the number of discontinuations, we can have a dramatic impact on the success of our patients and of our practices. I'll be talking later in this series about exactly why the eye feels discomfort with contact lenses, how we can measure this. What is it about contact lenses that perhaps make them comfortable or uncomfortable? And importantly, how can we manage this situation better? How can we make our patients more successful? And how can we dramatically increase the number of wearers? So please do join me for the remaining series of presentations.